You've probably seen the headlines. Move to Italy for €1. Buy a house for the price of an espresso. It sounds like the ultimate escape fantasy. A centuries-old stone home on a hilltop in Sicily or Sardinia. Yours for less than $1. But here's what most people don't tell you. These houses come with hidden costs, strict rules, and a lot of unexpected challenges. And if you're not prepared, your Italian dream can turn into an expensive nightmare. So before you start packing your bags and picturing yourself sipping wine on a sunny terrace, let's take a closer look. In this video, we're going to uncover the real story behind Italy's €1 house programs. You'll learn exactly why these homes are so cheap, what it actually costs to renovate them, and whether it's realistic for someone coming from another country, like the United States, Canada, or Australia, to make this dream a reality. Let's get started. To understand why these houses are so cheap, you first have to understand what's happening in rural Italy. Over the last few decades, thousands of small villages across the country have been slowly emptying out. Young people leave for bigger cities like Milan, Rome, or Florence to find work, education, and modern amenities. And as they go, they leave behind entire neighborhoods full of abandoned homes. Some of these villages have seen their populations cut in half, or even worse. Schools have closed, shops have shut down, and in many places the only people left are elderly residents who can't maintain the buildings or the local economy. This phenomenon even has a name: Italy's ghost towns. In 2023, a national report estimated that nearly 2,000 villages are at risk of total depopulation in the next 25 years. That's almost 60% of all Italian municipalities, with fewer than 5,000 residents. For local governments, this is a crisis. Empty houses don't just sit there quietly, they fall apart. They create safety hazards, attract vandalism, and drag down property values for everyone else. When a town loses too many people, it also loses funding, infrastructure, and basic services. So the mayors of these villages had to get creative. Instead of letting abandoned properties rot away, they decided to try something radical. They started offering these homes to anyone who would take them, often for the symbolic price of just €1. The idea is simple. If you attract new residents, especially younger families or remote workers, you can revive the local economy. New homeowners pay taxes, spend money at local businesses, hire builders and tradespeople, and bring life back to quiet streets. Some towns have also seen tourism potential in these programs. International buyers have come from the United States, Canada, the UK, and Australia, drawn by the romance of living in an old Italian village. And when a foreigner buys and renovates a property, it usually makes headlines, which helps put the town on the map. But make no mistake, selling a house for €1 isn't just a gift. It's a strategy to solve a demographic crisis that threatens the survival of these communities. And while the price tag is almost nothing, the commitment that comes with it is serious. That's why before you decide to take the plunge, it's important to understand exactly what you're signing up for and how much you'll really have to invest. In the next section, we'll break down how the €1 house programs actually work, what the rules are, and what steps you'll need to follow if you want to claim one for yourself. So now that you know why these towns are offering homes for almost nothing, let's talk about how you actually get one. Because even though the price tag sounds simple, the process has a lot of steps and quite a few strings attached. It's definitely not as easy as just showing up with a €1 coin and picking out the prettiest house on the street. If you're seriously thinking about this opportunity, it's important to understand exactly what happens from start to finish. Here's how the process usually works, step by step. First, you need to find a town with an active program. These offers open and close at different times, depending on the local government. Some towns will only release a handful of properties once or twice a year. Others have ongoing applications, but the houses can get reserved quickly. Popular places like Sambuca in Sicily, Musumeli, Ganghi, and Ololai in Sardinia have all attracted buyers from around the world. Most of these towns have dedicated websites where you can see photos of the properties, download the application forms, and read all the rules. Once you find a house you're interested in, you'll need to submit an application. This isn't like buying a normal home. You usually have to explain why you want to move there and what you plan to do with the property. Many towns prefer applicants who will actually live in the house or start a small business that benefits the community, like a bed and breakfast or a little shop. Your application usually needs to include a copy of your passport or national ID, proof that you have enough money to cover the renovations, sometimes a short plan describing exactly how you'll restore the property. If your application is approved, you'll be asked to pay a deposit, which is sometimes called a surety bond. This is a really important part of the process that often gets overlooked in headlines. Even though the house itself only costs €1, you almost always have to put down a refundable deposit. This amount is usually between €1,000 and €5,000. The town holds on to this money to make sure you actually follow through with your renovation plans. If you finish the work within the deadline, you get the deposit back. If you don't, the town keeps it. After you pay the deposit, you'll sign a purchase contract. This happens at a notary's office in Italy. You don't have to be an Italian citizen to buy property, but you do need something called a codice fiscale, which is an Italian tax code. Most buyers also hire an Italian lawyer or a notary to help with the paperwork, because the process can be confusing if you don't speak the language. Once the sale is complete, you'll officially own the house. But that's when the real work begins. You'll be required to submit a renovation plan showing exactly how you'll make the property safe and livable. Usually, you have to start renovations within 3 to 6 months after you buy the home, and you'll have a deadline, often between 1 and 3 years, to finish everything. Your renovation has to include basic improvements, like repairing the roof and walls, updating the plumbing and electrical systems, and making sure the house meets safety standards. During this time, you're responsible for all the costs, including construction, permits, legal fees, and utilities. We'll talk about how much those expenses add up to in the next section, because it's important to have a clear budget before you start. When the renovation is finished, the town will send an inspector to check that you've met all the requirements. If everything looks good, you'll get your deposit refunded. At that point, the house is fully yours to live in, use as a vacation home, or even rent out. But keep in mind that many towns have rules saying you have to keep the property for a certain number of years, sometimes 5 or 10, before you're allowed to sell it. This prevents people from flipping the houses right away, just to make a quick profit. And one last thing you need to know: owning a property in Italy does not automatically give you the right to live there full-time if you're not a citizen of the European Union. If you're coming from the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere outside the EU, you'll need a valid visa or residency permit if you want to stay longer than 90 days. We'll cover all the visa and residency options later in this video. But first, let's look at the part most people underestimate: the real cost of making one of these homes livable. So now that you know how the process works, let's talk about the part most people don't hear about in the headlines. Because even though the price tag says €1, the real cost of owning and renovating one of these properties is a lot higher. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of buying a beautiful Italian house for almost nothing. But if you don't understand the true expenses, you can end up spending way more than you planned. Let's break down all the costs you need to think about one by one. First, there's the renovation budget. Most of these homes have been abandoned for years, sometimes even decades. That means you're not just dealing with old paint or outdated kitchens. You're often facing serious problems, like crumbling walls, damaged roofs, and missing plumbing and wiring. At the very least, you'll need to bring the house up to basic safety and habitability standards. For a small property in poor condition, the most basic renovation will usually cost around €20,000 to €30,000. This might cover essential repairs like fixing the roof, reinforcing walls, installing a bathroom, and making sure the electricity is safe. But if you want to do a more complete renovation, adding heating and cooling, modern appliances, or higher quality finishes, your costs can easily rise to €50,000 or even €70,000. And in some cases, especially if the house is large or has major structural damage, the total cost can go well over 100,000 euros. Next, you need to think about professional fees and paperwork. Buying property in Italy requires a notary, and often a lawyer, to handle the contract and register the sale. You'll also need architectural plans and permits for the renovation. These costs can include notary fees, which are usually between 2,000 and 4,000 euros, legal assistance, around 1,000 to 3,000 euros, architectural plans and engineering reports, which can cost 2,000 to 5,000 euros, building permits and approvals, usually a few hundred euros more. When you add everything together, you should budget about 5,000 to 10,000 euros just for these professional services. Then there are the taxes and registration fees. Even though the purchase price is symbolic, you still have to pay property registration taxes. These taxes are typically a percentage of the assessed value of the property. Because these houses are worth very little on paper, the tax is usually between 500 and 1,500 euros. You also need to budget for the deposit or surety bond. Like we mentioned earlier, most towns require you to pay this up front. It's a guarantee that you'll complete the renovation. This amount is usually between 1,000 and 5,000 euros, depending on the municipality. If you finish the work as promised, you'll get the deposit back. But if you don't, the town keeps it. After that, there are ongoing expenses that come with owning any property in Italy. You'll need to pay yearly property taxes, called IMU, as well as trash collection fees, insurance, and utilities. For a small home, these costs often range from 100 to 250 euros per month, depending on where you live and how much you use. You also have to think about furnishing the property. Most of these houses are completely empty. They don't have appliances, kitchen cabinets, or even basic fixtures. To furnish and equip the home, you'll likely spend at least 5,000 to 10,000 euros, even if you choose simple and affordable options. And finally, if you don't live in Europe, you need to plan for travel costs. You'll probably need to visit Italy multiple times during the process to inspect the house, sign contracts, check on renovations, and set everything up. Flights, hotels, car rentals, and meals can add a few thousand euros more to your overall budget. To give you a realistic example, here's what an average project might look like for a modest property. Purchase price, €1. Renovation, 40,000 euros. Professional fees, 7,000 euros. Taxes and registration, 1,000 euros. Deposit, 2,500 euros. Furnishing, 7,000 euros. The total comes to about 57,000 euros. And if you run into surprises, like hidden structural damage or delays getting permits, your costs can climb much higher. This is why it's so important to have a clear budget and a financial cushion before you start. In the next section, we'll look at another critical question. If you're not an Italian or EU citizen, can you actually live in your new home full-time? Let's talk about visas, residency, and what it takes to stay long-term. So now you have a good idea of what it really costs to buy and renovate a €1 house. But there's another big question you need to answer before you make any plans. If you're not an Italian citizen, or you don't have a European Union passport, can you actually stay in Italy full-time and live in your new home? The short answer is, not automatically. A lot of people see these listings and think buying a property will somehow give them residency rights. But that isn't how it works in Italy. Owning a house doesn't grant you a visa, and it doesn't mean you can live in the country permanently without permission. If you're coming from the United States, Canada, Australia, or any other non-EU country, you're usually allowed to stay in Italy for up to 90 days within a 180-day period as a tourist. That means you can visit, oversee renovations, or spend a summer vacation in your house. But after those 90 days are up, you have to leave the country, or you risk fines and problems re-entering Europe. If you want to stay longer than 90 days, you'll need to apply for a visa or residency permit. There are a few options you can consider, depending on your situation. One option is an elective residency visa. This type of visa is for people who have enough passive income or savings to support themselves without working in Italy. To qualify, you usually need to prove you have a steady income, like a pension, rental income, or investments, of at least 30,000 euros per year. Some consulates may ask for even more, especially if you're applying as a couple or with a family. It's important to know that the elective residency visa does not allow you to work for an Italian company or earn local income. You have to show that you can pay all your living expenses independently. Another option is the self-employment visa. This visa is designed for freelancers or business owners who plan to run a business in Italy. It has strict requirements, and you usually need to get authorization from the local Chamber of Commerce before you apply. You'll also have to prove you have contracts or clients and meet minimum income thresholds. A third option is the digital nomad visa. Italy recently approved a digital nomad visa for remote workers. This could be a good fit if you work for a company outside Italy or run your own online business. However, the details and requirements are still evolving, and you'll likely need to show proof of income, health insurance, and a clean criminal record. If you have Italian ancestry, you might also be eligible for citizenship by descent, which would allow you to live and work in Italy without any visa restrictions. But this process can take a long time and requires a lot of documentation. No matter which path you choose, keep in mind that applying for any long-term visa involves paperwork, waiting periods, and sometimes in-person interviews at your nearest Italian consulate. If you're only planning to use your house as a vacation property, or you're comfortable visiting for shorter stays, you can simply rely on the 90-day tourist allowance. Many international buyers do exactly that. They visit a few times a year, but don't live in the property full-time. It's also worth mentioning that if you plan to rent out your renovated house as a vacation rental, you'll need to register the property and comply with local regulations, including paying taxes on any rental income. In short, while owning a €1 house sounds like an open invitation to move to Italy forever, the reality is more complicated. You'll need to make sure you qualify for the right visa before you plan to live there year-round. In the next section, we'll talk about the pros and cons of this whole process, and whether buying one of these houses is really worth it for most people. So, now you understand the rules, the costs, and the visa requirements that come with buying a €1 house in Italy. At this point, you're probably wondering, is it really worth all the time, money, and effort? The answer really depends on what you want out of the experience. Let's look at the biggest advantages first. The most obvious benefit is the price of the property itself. Even after you factor in the renovation costs and all the fees, it can still be much cheaper than buying a move-in ready home in many parts of Europe or North America. In some cases, you might end up with a fully restored Italian house for less than the cost of a small condo back home. Another advantage is the lifestyle. Living in a quiet Italian village means you get to enjoy a slower pace of life, beautiful scenery, and rich cultural traditions. If you've always dreamed of having a home in Europe, this can be an affordable way to make that dream come true. There's also the potential for income. Some buyers renovate these properties and turn them into vacation rentals or bed and breakfasts. Tourism is a big part of Italy's economy, and travelers love the idea of staying in unique, historic homes. Finally, there's the sense of accomplishment. Restoring an old house is a challenge, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. You get to bring a piece of history back to life and become part of a local community that truly appreciates your investment. But there are also some very real downsides you need to consider. The first is the time commitment. Even a simple renovation can take many months, and more complicated projects can drag on for years. If you live outside Europe, you'll need to travel back and forth multiple times to oversee the work. The second big challenge is unexpected costs. Old buildings almost always have hidden problems that you don't discover until you start construction. It's not unusual for budgets to go way over the original estimates. If you don't have extra money set aside, this can quickly become stressful. There's also the issue of bureaucracy. Italy is known for having complicated paperwork, especially when it comes to permits and approvals. Things often move slowly, and it can be frustrating if you're used to a faster process. Another potential downside is isolation. Many of these villages are very small, with only a few hundred residents. If you don't speak Italian, or you prefer having lots of shops and services nearby, rural life can feel lonely. Some people love the peace and quiet, but others find it harder than they expected. Finally, there's the question of long-term commitment. In many towns, you're required to keep the property for several years before you're allowed to sell it. If your plans change, or you decide you don't like living there, you might be stuck with a house you no longer want. So, is it worth it? For some people, absolutely. If you have the budget, the patience, and the desire to take on a big project, buying a €1 house can be a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. But if you're just looking for an easy way to move abroad or invest with minimal effort, it's probably not the right choice. Before you decide, take time to really think about your goals, your resources, and how much time you can realistically commit. Talk to people who have done it and get professional advice so you understand every step. In the final section, we'll wrap up with a few tips to help you decide if this is the right move for you and how to get started if you're ready to take the plunge. So now that you've seen all the details, the costs, the steps, and the pros and cons, you might be wondering whether this is something you should seriously think about. The truth is, these programs are not for everyone. They work best for a very specific type of person. If you're someone who loves old buildings and doesn't mind taking on a big project, this could be a great fit. It can be especially rewarding if you enjoy renovation work or have experience managing contractors and budgets. It also helps if you have flexibility with your time and your income. Because these houses require months or even years of planning and work, it's important to have the patience to see the project through. If you can work remotely or have a steady income stream that doesn't depend on living in a big city, you'll find it easier to settle into rural Italian life. This option can also be a good fit for people who want a second home or a vacation property they can visit part of the year. If you only plan to stay for short visits, you can rely on the 90-day tourist limit and avoid some of the visa complications. Many buyers use these homes as family getaways or long-term rental properties. And finally, if you've always dreamed of becoming part of a small European community, this is a unique way to do it. You'll have the chance to contribute to the revival of a village, meet local people, and experience a slower, more traditional lifestyle. But if you prefer convenience, modern amenities, or city life, you might find the reality of these projects overwhelming. And if you don't have a financial cushion to cover unexpected costs, it could end up causing more stress than it's worth. The most important thing is to be realistic about what you're getting into. Take time to research each town carefully and think honestly about whether this experience matches your goals and your lifestyle. If you decide to move forward, it can be an incredible adventure and a chance to create something special that will last for generations. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, remember to like and subscribe for more guides about moving abroad and finding your place in the world.